back, everyone. This week, we are finally getting to reviewing the new Dune movie that just came out a couple weeks ago, starring Timothy Chalamet, Zendaya, Jason Momoa,
Oscar Isaac,
Oscar Isaac. I could only think of his Star Wars name. Josh Brolin.
Dave Bautista,
Well, there you go. A ginormous, massive cast.
I was
Polka
about to
Dot,
say, honestly, this
Polka Dot
cast,
Man.
this cast is so good off the get-go.
Classic, one of the best sci-fi books ever written. A classic. It's considered the Lord of the Rings of sci-fi. Massive, massive series. But it kind of follows the original book's story in this movie, follow the kind of ascension of Paul Atreides, son of Duke Atreides, who was sent down to govern the planet Arrakis, also known as Dune, which is the planet where the substance spice or melange is the only place it can be harvested, and then a whole bunch of stuff happens. And it's the story of how Paul Atreides kind of ascends to power in whatever form that might take. So yeah, what did you guys think about this?
Personally, I really enjoyed this movie. This movie, in my opinion, remembering all the other movies that came out this year, in my books, has won Movie of the Year. It was so beautiful in just about every single way. So I've got to get this movie a 9 out of 10.
I'll agree a lot with Zach. It was very well made. A lot of care was taken into this movie. I don't know how much it fell in line with the books, which I know is something you'll discuss, Andrew, but it was so well done. Great cast. I think the only thing I got a problem with is the way it ended, but other than that, just a very, very well done movie with spectacular visuals and great storytelling. Just very well done. So I'd give it a 9 also, 9 out of 10.
I'm glad you guys enjoyed it. I give it a 10 out of 10. It's become one of my favorite movies, partially due to the fact that the book is one of my favorite books. Definitely my favorite science fiction book. I loved it. It did closely follow the book. The only time they changed things where they kind of had to change it to just be coherent for a movie instead of a book where you can't hear a character's thoughts. And then the stuff that they changed or it might have cut out some information, they later supplied that information which they cut out in a different format, so you weren't missing out on any of the information that they would have given in the book. So yeah, I quite liked it. It is already greenlit for a second movie, so this movie was only the halfway point in the book. So I was quite happy they didn't rush it and try to fit the whole story into 2.5-hour movie, but now they're making it 2.
Honestly, this is how movies should be. Well taken care of. This year's movies list throughout so far has just been really disappointing.
With some diamonds in the rough here and there, but
for the most part, yeah.
Yeah.
This movie really brought some of the joy of watching new movies back. So I'm really excited to see how part 2 goes, and I'm going to have to finish the books. That's the only reason I didn't give it a 10 out of 10, because I want to read the books first. But honestly, this movie has to be one of my favorites. It definitely on one of my top 10s.
One of the big criticisms that people have about the book and the series in general is that it's just very confusing. I've heard the joke that like I'm halfway through Dune, I still don't know what it's about, stuff like that. Not only is the plot pretty convoluted, it doesn't have the basic plot structure of just something is set up in the beginning, obstacle, and then resolution. It's just very, I do not want to say it's about the journey because it's not. And I'm not going to say there's no lesson to be gotten from this because then English teachers are going to jump down my throat. But it's just a story about a character and everything that happens in this character's
a character's life, really.
Yeah, it's not one that has like a.
You could kind of say it's kind of like a journal, maybe.
So the book, the way it's carried out in the movie, Paul is this almost modern day religious figure. He is space Jesus, essentially, to the people on Arrakis and to the Bene Gesserit clan. He is their Kwisatz Haderach and their, what do they call him? Muad'Dib, which is just their messiah. And the book is delivered in the form of kind of like a religious text. So each chapter starts with a quote from like their fictional religious books that kind of talk about him. And you don't know it's talking about him till like halfway or 3/4 of the book, where it kind of like starts connecting that he is this figure they're talking about. So this is kind of the first book at least is kind of his ascension to this religious character.
Now, I'll
It
ask
is-
you, Andrew, in your opinion, if they do a good job on the second part, do you think that they'll possibly do book 2?
No, not at all.
No?
Just so the first book is Paul's ascension to power, is how I'll put it without giving away spoilers, just to power. The second book is him dealing with the consequences of that power, because the main plot is that he was groomed for this position. He didn't seek it out, he didn't train for it, he was groomed for it, and it was thrust upon him, and he has to either man up and do the best he can with it, or and like take his what was prepared for him, or just like flop and fall. So obviously he takes the only path available. And the second book is him kind of like dealing with the consequences of being that person that was being that figure, and then leads to like his children at the end of the book. And from what I know, because I haven't read the third book, he's not in the third book.
No,
It's his
he's not.
kids in the third book.
No, I think it's actually. I think my brother was telling me a brief synopsis. It like skips a generation or two.
There you go. It's kind of the concept of like the Skywalker family.
He appears as a Force ghost. I'll show you the
Yeah,
ways.
without being like
My bad, a
as
Spice
direct
Ghost.
as a storytelling sort of thing. Yeah, I don't think they're gonna make a second, like, because the first book was well loved, and the second book was a disappointment. In the form of the first book was so good, we expected so much out of a second book that it just kind of fell short. And then when the third book came out, everyone was like, "Oh, it was just the setup for the third book. Wow, okay, amazing." But I haven't gotten there yet.
Well, from what I know, the person who wrote the first book died apparently with only the rough draft. I thought he died during the rough draft of the second one.
No, he wrote the first three, I believe. I'll verify this, but and then it was his brother. It was his brother who took over the series, but I'm gonna find this out.
Yeah, because on the cover of the second book it has 2 authors' names. But other than that, I like how they had all these great actors, but they didn't
Mhm.
overuse them. I really enjoyed that, how they didn't overuse them to get publicity, I guess. I mean,
Yeah.
they did a really good job with their trailers, overusing some of the characters, and those characters were barely even seen in the movie. So I really enjoyed that. They had really good publicity for this movie.
So he died before writing the seventh book.
Okay.
So he wrote 6 of them.
Holy cow, there's 7 books.
No, there's so much more. Because then his brother took over and like co-wrote like the rest of the universe. So there
So this
are
is like-
15. There's 15 books right now.
So this is like a well thought out, expanded universe.
You could say it's kind of like the Star Wars universe,
Okay.
Yeah.
except so
Just
I
different
think that's
vibes.
yeah, I think that's probably the best comparison. Yeah.
It's just an expanded space universe. There's no like power system sort of thing. Yeah, so there's no like Jedi or anything like that.
There's no one ring to rule them all.
So I guess now we're getting into spoiler territory, because I'll deviate from the book because we're not reviewing the book. As far as the movie goes and the changes that I wish they kept the most. So in the book, the very first scene was the Gom Jabbar, where he sticks his hand in the box. The very first scene in the book was him waking up from one of his dreams and going to see the Mother Supreme, or whatever her name is. I forget her actual name, her actual title. And that was a very long scene because that's where she explained all of like the, oh, you're going to be the Kwisatz Haderach. That's what this means. Bene Gesserit clan should only be breeding females to further the genetic superiority genetic evolution that they're trying to accomplish. So the Kwisatz Haderach is also the only male Bene Gesserit. And the reason why Jessica is so kind of, I guess, scolded or like criticized by the Bene Gesserit clan is because she had a boy when she was supposed to have a girl. They didn't explain how that was a disobedience.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you on that because that seemed like a really big portion of the plot, and it might explain it in part 2.
Yeah, basically because of her aptitude, Jessica thought that she could give birth and train the Kwisatz Haderach. She thought she could. Also
So
because of her bloodline, which they will reveal in the second
Okay,
part.
I was gonna ask.
Which they kind of
so she
also did
was
mention
kind of
in this
important.
movie. They kind of
Yeah,
also
because
mentioned her bloodline.
they did, but they didn't
Just
explain
very
it or
vividly.
reveal.
Okay, that's probably
So
when they're gonna explain most of that.
yeah,
Okay.
so basically she was criticized and looked down on for having a boy instead of a girl, which the book doesn't explain that, but it hints at the fact that they can kind of like control that sort of thing. Some of the things they left out is, remember that scene where the dude kind of like looked back into his skull and then spat out like the calculation that he
Yeah,
just did?
both of them did.
Yes.
Two guys did that. The guy, Polka Dot Man, and then the guy on the House of Atreides.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so those guys are called Mentats. They're basically the advisors to house rulers. They're basically just human computers. They are raised from a young age once they are discovered to have an aptitude, and they're just kind of like their brain is trained to be able to do that. But not everyone can do it. You have to like kind of be born with the aptitude for it. Something that they didn't mention in the movie is that Paul was given the option to do that because he had the aptitude. So his brain was capable of like getting to that level of calculation, as well as already the Bene Gesserit training that he had gotten. Gurney Halleck, I'm gonna mix up the two army guys. Gurney Halleck was the not the commander, like commander of the bodyguards or something like that. Thufir Hawat was the Mentat. Man, these names are just wild. I think the only other scene that I was disappointed in that they changed, or just I feel like you missed out on, is at the very end. Because what happened when Paul fought the one dude? They didn't fight then and there. They got to the compounds. Like I'm forgetting what those are called now, but they got to
Their hideout, essentially.
yeah. I'm
Yeah.
forgetting what those people are called. Sietch are what the compounds are called.
Yes.
Fremen, there we go. The Fremen Sietch. Yeah, they were discovered after escaping the sandworm, and they're like, wow, look at them. And they kind of defended themselves successfully. They were taken back to the Sietch, and then the one dude, the cocky dude, was like, his grievance was not against Jessica. His grievance was not that I'm not going to follow a woman. It was that Paul had beaten him earlier, but his argument was that he took me by surprise. He wouldn't beat me in a straight fight, and I can't handle this kind of like stain on my honor. So they were fighting, and as you saw earlier, the cool, I guess, like tech that he had been trained on, the body shields. Basically, what they do is they slow things they slow things the closer they get to you. So he was trained with those in mind because that was the major military tech that was used. So his reflexes and reactions are calibrated to account for that. So when he didn't have that because it attracts the sandworms, when fighting this dude, he was just barely dodging the blade strikes and swings by like inches. So in the movie, when they said he's toying with him because he was refusing to kill him off the bat, in the book, it was because it looked like he was just on purpose, barely dodging the attacks to just like antagonize him. When in reality, that's not what was happening. And then he killed him. And in the movie, they left this out, which I hope they bring in the second one, is he cried after he killed the guy. And that happening in the CH, everyone was just like struck in awe because they saw it as you're giving your body's water to the dead, which is like unheard of in their community because like water is such a sacred thing. So the fact that he's willingly giving his water for someone means he's, I guess, like a holy person.
I mean, it
And
looked like he was about to do that after the fight anyway, so.
Yeah. So those are my only insights from the book to movie. Otherwise, I really like how they
it
did it.
doesn't seem like there's a lot of discrepancy, and most of them seem like they can be solved within part 2. So that's really exciting to hear.
And like I said, when they revealed things later that they had to cut out from a long scene, like the Gom Jabbar scene where the Mother Superior revealed everything, they delivered all that information in the very next scene where he ran after his mom, and they put it in a comprehensible manner. The scene where there was a tiny, I liked to see how they designed like all the technology, because before it was just what was in my head, but the technology of this world, or at least this planet, is so cool.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
The still suits that just recycle and reuse the body's water.
So cool. I feel like I've seen stuff similar to them before in other things. but still getting to see them.
Yeah. The bodies,
Just the idea of them is very fascinating.
the body shield tech that was awesome.
I enjoyed the some of their airships and how they
Hoppers.
appeared. Like, yeah,
The Dragonfly ships.
the dragonfly. Yeah,
That
I
was
was
so
like,
cool.
that's just beautiful and ingenious to see that go across. Visually, that is so appealing just to watch. Honestly, they did such a great execution with this movie, in my opinion.
Yeah, one of the big things it was the lady that was sent to like help smooth transition. She was the, I guess, planetologist of
Oh,
Dune.
yes.
Yeah,
Um,
I know who you're talking about. Don't
yeah,
remember
so
her name either,
when
but
they put on the suits, like they slipped in kind of the
thing where he knew how to put it on.
yeah they
Yeah, they did
that
that a
stuff.
few times. Like when she would say specific quotes and he would recognize them.
And quotes like that were the chapter beginnings that I was talking about earlier.
Oh, those.
Yeah,
Hmm.
and then like the little assassination bug in the book, like they go into in depth into like why he's not moving and scared, but it's a motion detected, short range remote control assassination device. So that's why they were like searching the compound for someone, because it can only be controlled from a certain distance. That's why he wasn't moving, because it was motion controlled. Yeah, the scene where, man, rip Duke Atreides. I liked his character so much.
I did.
Um, but the way they used his death to try and get rid of the Harkonnen boss, oh,
Honestly, that whole scene destroy like their whole political power just with one man. Like that whole idea was a tearjerker. It's
my
like,
goodness.
if you want to go out like this, and that it has to be one of the coolest and most saddest ways to go out.
Well, no, I will say they showed you his death at the very beginning, and you build up so much likeness for this character that when he ends up dying, you have so much sympathy for it, even though you know it's coming.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Because he was a good man. He was a good man.
yeah.
My goodness, I hate the Harkonnen is such a good villain because he's so hated.
And honestly, when you have a good villain to stand behind the protagonist, that only makes it so much better.
I will say though, I liked there were a lot of characters in these things, but almost every single character went out like a boss.
They really
Goodness,
did.
Gurney Halleck, Jason Momoa's character. Oh my goodness.
That I was. I'm like,
Jason Momoa's character was awesome.
Oh my goodness.
Oscar's Isaac character with the whole thing about being like, most of these characters are gonna die. Oscar Isaac mentions it for his character a little beforehand. Jason Momoa's character, you know that the whole time. So I mean, it was just interesting to see all those characters that you had all this time to grow so fond of, and then them to just go out like complete bosses. To be perfectly honest, even the Doctor character, still,
I
even
mean,
though he was the traitor, but
you only had a few scenes, and once he gives you the reason, you're like, oh well,
well, no,
and then he's
the
like,
thing
by the
was,
way, if you do this and you do what I tell you to do, you can avenge your whole family and your whole clan, and I can still get what I want.
well, no, the thing is, he made so many stops along the way that were not necessary for him to do this, but he was like, I'm thinking like 40 steps ahead to try to figure this thing out.
Yeah, and I could be mistaken, but I believe in the book he was getting revenge for the murder of his wife instead of rejoining with his wife. So this whole like plot was just like, I'm gonna kill a Baron. He's dead. I think he went and sought out Baron Harkonnen, like sought out the deal and was like, hey, I know you want an in, and I know you want a way to get at the Atreides. I'll help you in return for like money or something, or like a title. But he was just using it.
Well, using this, I think, in a movie, so you don't get as much explanation. I think what they did was probably better.
Yeah, I think they introduced his nephew much earlier. Like I think up until this point, his nephew wasn't even in the book.
Whose nephew?
Who was his nephew?
Baron, the dude who kept reporting back to Baron Harkonnen.
Dave Bautista?
Yes.
Okay.
Dude.
He was a big character later in the book, but it was more like after the fact.
Yeah.
Mm.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
However, we
think I-
should be seeing a fight between him and Paul.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's Dave Bautista. I really don't.
That should be coming up. I knew this was going to happen, but I liked how they marketed this whole thing off of their actors, Zendaya being one of the main ones they were
Yeah.
marketing it off of. 7 minutes of screen time.
Honestly,
no,
I
it was-
was saying it earlier. Honestly, they did a great job showing who they have for their cast in their trailers and then focusing on the story instead of on who they have as actors.
Mhm.
Which is something not a lot of stories do nowadays.
No,
I mean,
but
there's going to be
it
a
should be
big
done.
part in the second one,
Yeah.
but
Well, I mean, I will say my one problem with this, which I kind of stated earlier, was the weird way it ended, which would kind of would have had me going like, okay, there better be a part two, or this is good, but it makes no sense, like as to why
Yeah.
they, because I mean,
feel
it's
like
a great.
they probably already got the green light before.
Yeah, well, I'm pretty sure they did too, because as soon as it dropped within the day, they went ahead and said, by the way, part two of Dune is in production right now. So I mean,
Yeah.
but yeah,
And if they planned this out beforehand and everything, which I'm sure they did, ingenious on their part, they have thought this whole thing out so well that I'm excited for what they're doing with it.
oh yeah, for sure.
you guys have any questions?
I have a lot of questions, but I feel like most of them will be answered in part two, so I'll hold off.
All right.
So who is the emperor? That's one thing I do have a question about. Does he
He's
like
a-
rule all the stuff, or does he like rule half the stuff?
No, yeah, it's from what I know, it's a giant galactic federation sort of thing. Not as all controlling as the like galactic Star Wars Galactic Empire is, but it's more of kind of just like the US government sort of thing, and the states are planets. He's got governing power over all of them. And he can send different like officials and dignitaries to like oversee certain areas.
I know in the very beginning, I thought he also had the voice. It was mostly just the way they worded it. When his mother told Paul to use the voice and then brought up the Emperor right afterwards. And I'm like, oh, I guess the Emperor also has the voice.
So that voice thing is super cool. The way it is explained is that one of the Bene Gesserit like tenets is they practice total control of their own body. So they can minutely control every single muscle and like joint and reflex in their body, as well as emotions. So the voice is a form of control of their voice, and what it is they can analyze and break down someone else's speech pattern and then mimic it in a way that makes it very suggestive to weak minds.
So it makes it seem more like to the brain like it's a command going through, right?
Yes.
In a way,
Yeah.
it's pretty much like the Jedi mind trick.
Yeah. It makes you think it's your own thought because it's your voice.
I like that. I like yeah. I hope
That's actually pretty cool. I wish they would have gone more in depth with it, but that's still.
part two is always a possibility to explain all of the questions we have. That's why I don't really want to ask all my questions.
That's fine. Those like tiny like how things work details, I doubt they're gonna answer.
Well, yeah.
Well, as long as they stick with the story.
Yeah.
Well, I
then
feel like
I'm
they're
gonna
gonna.
be.
Yeah, I feel like they're gonna explain the voice more in part two because he's gonna have to focus on training that a lot more.
Mhm.
I don't know how much he uses it in the book.
It's not. See, that's the weird thing about the story. It's not like he's gonna go through a training arc and then.
No, that's not what I mean. But
Yeah,
like,
it's very
because-
political.
because she said you have pretty much you have it the understanding, but you don't have the right pitch.
Yeah.
So it's going to be more of going into detail of him trying to find out how to quote unquote perfect it, just figure out the right pitches for everything.
Not gonna lie, I don't think there's much use of it in the second half.
That's perfectly fine too.
It's more of him growing into his
Other
Messiah role / powers.
What other powers does he get?
So you know how he kind of like saw into the future, sort of?
Yeah,
Those. Yeah.
like foresight.
Yeah, that sort of thing. Like being able to see the possibilities. It's more of just kind of like you got to know the consequences of your actions, but he can see it very clearly in like different paths.
Okay, so he can't like see so at some points he can see the direct future and what is going to happen no matter what.
I
At
mean,
other
like at
points
the
he can
like
see.
yeah,
Yeah.
like at the very end of the movie where he's fighting that guy, he saw him get killed during that
Yeah.
fight.
Like he can see like end paths, but he doesn't know like how they get there
Yeah.
and stuff like that.
Okay.
So he can say things like this is gonna happen, but he will have no idea of the
When or where.
actions leading up to that. And those just get stronger and he learns how to interpret them more and he learns how to be a better leader and stuff like that. It's very political.
Which honestly would be enjoyable to watch because he just doesn't have that um mentality right now.
Yeah, he's not a hero, and I love that.
No.
He's just a dude who was groomed for this role, and he's
Yeah,
going, might as well ride the wave.
yeah, pretty much.
Kronk Award. I was gonna say the Jason Momoa's character.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say
Yeah.
because honestly, there's only a few options, but everyone does such a great job that it's difficult to figure out. I feel like is the best fit.
Yeah, I'll agree with that.
Yeah, he's the one who makes. He's just the most happy-go-lucky.
Thank you everyone for watching this this week's episode of Galactic Reviews. I hope you enjoyed it. I personally enjoyed watching this movie, if anything. So tune in next week when we watch the Injustice movie. So goodbye.